Hello, and welcome to Bladder Cancer Staying Grounded in a Time of Crisis. My name is Stephanie Chisholm, and I'm the Director of Education and Research at the Bladder Cancer Advocacy Network. I think most of us will agree that we're living in a very stressful time with the current COVID-19 pandemic. People use the term unprecedented incessantly, and I think that that's really a true situation. We've never had to deal with a crisis of this magnitude. When you add bladder cancer and the diagnosis for yourself or a loved one to all the stress that's going on around you, that stress level can escalate out of control. So, what do you do to help stay grounded? That's a real challenge for us as a community. To stay grounded means you have the ability to stay calm and to connect at the core of who you are in the face of all of the uncertainty that we're all experiencing. It means you aren't really controlled by the chaos, but rather by your values, your sense of purpose, and the vision you have predetermined for your life. And I think it's really a challenge to keep that in your focus. And it's really easy to get down a rabbit hole of watching all the things that are happening on the news. And it's really hard to keep yourself centered. And so today I'm really delighted to welcome Beacon patient advocate John Lanci for our first Facebook Live event on the COVID-19 crisis. So welcome, John. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great. John is such an interesting individual. He earned his master's in theology from the University of Notre Dame and his MA and Ph.D. in religious studies from Harvard University. And John was a professor at Stonehill College in New England, where he taught religious studies for 30 years before retiring as an emeritus professor in 2016. It's really a pleasure to have you here, John. Can you tell me how you got involved with Beacon in the first place?
Sure. In 2014, I was diagnosed with bladder cancer, non-metastasized invasive bladder cancer, and unfortunately it resisted BCG treatment. And therefore, in July of 2015, I had a radical cystectomy. I can never say that word. I wonder why.
It's okay.
To have my bladder removed. At the same time, they were taking my prostate out as a gift, they said, and they discovered I had serious prostate cancer at the same time. So I had to go through chemotherapy and radiation and all of that. And needless to say, I was a little down. And my doctor said, among other things, that I should get a hold of Beacon. And I did that, and I became a patient advocate. And I've met some incredible people, wonderful people. I learned a lot. And it's really been good. Although it's been a tough couple of years, it's been good.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. And I know, all of your story, and it's wonderful to have you as part of our community. We greatly appreciate that. And it really is quite an experience to not only be diagnosed with bladder cancer, to have everything removed, to find out that you also had prostate cancer. So what are some of the things that you did to help you get through? Because those are some real stressful moments. What did you use, John, to help you get through this?
Well, like most people, I hope, I had strong family connections. I had wonderful colleagues at both where I worked and in the local community. And as I said, at Beacon, and many friends who went way out of the way to really understand what I was going through. Also, I've spent a whole life studying religion, and I'm a practitioner. I've been in, the Navajo would say, I've been on the Jesus road now for about 60 years. And I think the deep spiritual connections that I had with others and with how I see the universe, how I see God, really helped keep my spirits up and my attitude positive. Plus, I'm an Italian. There's a bit of fatalism in me. You play the hand you're dealt.
Mm-hmm. As an Italian, I understand that term.
Yes.
Exactly. So from what you shared with us about your bladder cancer experience, you have been dealt quite a hand, obviously. And some of the folks in our community have told Beacon that they're using things like exercise, meditation and mindfulness, yoga, good nutrition, even when you have to get your good nutrition from what you stored in your pantry. What have you done to stay mindful and grounded through the last 6 years of your journey with bladder cancer? And how are you tapping into some of that now in light of all that's going on around us?
Well, as I said before, as you said, I've spent my whole career studying religion. And in part, I've watched religious communities grow and thrive. And that typically happens When individuals, both as part of a community and alone on their own, do everything they can, no matter what life sends them, if they do everything they can to stay centered and grounded, I don't want to offer something new here today as much as remind each of us who are here as bladder cancer survivors or caregivers or advocates. I want to remind you what you already know. To survive in a time of catastrophe, be it a cancer diagnosis or a plague, to survive, we need to take deep breaths and let ourselves find our center, the place where we can discover our resilience and our endurance. Breathe. That's what I said to myself when I first got the diagnosis. Breathe. Today, I want to invite you into a brief conversation about staying grounded. I want to talk about what works for me. Maybe it will spur you, maybe to share some of the techniques you use to stay grounded when the ground of the familiar seems to drop out from underneath our feet. Can you take some time today, right now, to discover from your experience with cancer what could help you deal with the current crisis? I want to start with a relaxation exercise, just a couple minutes. So to do this, wherever you are, get comfortable. Okay. Let your shoulders go. If you're sitting in a chair, let your arms just hang out. Close your eyes, no falling asleep. Close your eyes and just concentrate for a moment on your breathing. But we're not going to do just that. I want you to imagine the picture, the portrait that I paint right now. Okay? You are in a forest, a friendly place at night. Imagine you and your closest family and friends. You're walking through the woods and you see a fire, big bonfire. And around the bonfire are rocking chairs. Clearly, this was a place meant for you. So you and your friends go to the fire, take a seat on the wooden rocker, feel the seat underneath you, and just rock a little bit. Look around. Who are the people you're with? The living as well as the dead. They're here with you, with us. If you're on the Jesus road, maybe the Lord himself is sitting there in one of the chairs, or the Buddha. Look at the fire for a moment. Forget about everything else. Just look at the fire. Smell it. Smell the wood burning. And keep breathing. Look at the sparks. Watch the sparks. Oh my God. The sparks are going up into the sky. Follow a couple sparks up into the dark sky. And take a look. The sparks mingle with the most beautiful array of stars you've ever seen. Look at the stars, the fire. Hear it crackling. Breathe, breathe deeply. And just coming up over the treetops, look at the crescent moon. Beautiful, cold, but warm crescent moon. Breathe in, breathe out, relax. Okay, now come back. We'll get back to that.
Okay. Well, thank you for that little respite, John. That was very pleasant. So, what do you think most bladder cancer patients have learned from their experience as they went through their diagnosis and treatment? And what are those things that, you learned personally, do you think we can tap into to help with the stress of this current situation with this COVID-19?
Well, I think for me, the most important thing that I learned and I'm not sure I knew this. And it's funny because once I became a member of the bladder cancer community, I discovered that everyone else knew stuff that I didn't. And this was one of those things, how dangerous stress can be to your health. I had lived a very stressful life my whole life and not worried about it. But we know that there are connections between reducing stress and promoting healing. And we know that we can lessen our stress and promote our healing by paying attention to what is going on in our minds and what is going on in our bodies. So for me, I guess it's all about paying attention. When I talk about paying attention, I'm sort of following Buddhist ideas, but they're filtered through the work of Jon Kabat-Zinn. You may have heard of him, a physician in the 70s and 80s
Mm-hmm.
who was influential in using Eastern meditation practices to help patients with chronic pain that the medicine couldn't touch. You may have heard of his wonderfully named famous book, Full Catastrophe Living. It's still in print, and it's a good book to take a look at.
And we have lots of time to read now, as a matter of
We
fact.
sh- we surely do, and it's a big book too. But he expanded it by doubling the size. It's a doorstopper. But Kabat-Zinn suggests that when his patients meditate, the primary goal is not to empty the mind of all distraction. Okay, most of us think, well, just like what I did with you, the goal is to empty the mind of all distraction. Not quite. Okay, rather, we try to empty the mind so that we can identify what the distractions are, rather than have them lurking in our unconscious or our dreams or just in our mood swings. But once we identify them while we're doing our quiet time, our mindfulness time, we can empty the mind and lay them aside so that we can come back to them later.
Can you give
Um,
us an example of how you use those things? What are some of those things you've put in the wheelbarrow on the side, maybe to address later? How
well,
have you done that? Can you give us an example?
thinking about this presentation, going back to my whole catalog of fears and anxieties, I think I'm thinking back to when I was first diagnosed and they removed the tumor, but I needed 6 BCG treatments. I was terrified. I had had a couple of cystectomies that were
Cystoscopy.
cystoscopies.
Right.
Somehow I blank those words out. I had a
It's
couple of cystoscopies that were incredibly painful. Lidocaine didn't seem to be involved. Um, and when it came to the note, as the time approached that I was going to have 6 catheterizations, I won't say I was terrified, but I was more than a little upset. Um, and so my morning meditations were filled with that anxiety. Would the procedures work? Would they hurt as much as the other ones did? And I really had to put those anxieties out of my mind. But before I could do that, I had to confront the fear, not confront it and deny it, and not confront it and entertain it, but rather I said to the fear, okay, I hear you, fear. I'll come back and sit with you later. Now I need to center. And I did. I went back, and I sat with it and let it out. And it didn't go away. That wasn't the goal. I mean, I'd love that, but that's not what happens. But I was fine. And I got through it. When I'm feeling deeply stressed, I try always first to center myself, perhaps with an image like the one I offered earlier, of another wonderful image of going into a cave and just being quiet with friends and resting. And there are all kinds of things, whatever the imagination can do. And I just focus on the image. And as I focus on the image, I listen for what distracts me. Usually it's not something as dramatic as 6 catheterizations. Usually it's more like right now I'm getting ready to move 2,000 miles. What should I pack in what box, sort of thing. Yeah, little things. So I try to listen for what distracts me and I pay attention to it for a moment and then I send it away for, we'll sit with you later. I don't worry too much about remembering what I banish from my mind. Some people might say, well, no, you'll forget. It's like, I never forget the things that are really important when I'm scared. And I think that that's kind of, what makes me afraid. I can remember.
My Italian mother always used to say, if it's important, it'll come back to you.
Oh, and it does, even if it's not sometimes.
So, what's your goal in doing all of those things, John? What are you hoping to get out of doing that?
Well, as I said, I think it's a fool's errand to try to think that somehow we can get rid of the fear and the anxiety, especially when we're living in it every day. We don't really get rid of it. We're just at that point just suppressing it, and it's going to bite us in the end. So my goal is alignment. That's the word I use, alignment with what is. The goal of the kind of meditation Kabat-Zinn talks about that I'm, stealing, the goal of this kind of mindful meditation is not to deny the stressors or just make them go away for a few minutes of calm, okay? The goal is to identify, observe, experience the stress and the stressor, to pay attention to what's bothering me rather than trying to avoid it or deny it. In this way, I try to practice being in the moment, not in the past, thinking about old pain and difficulties, or the future, worrying about what horror may be coming down the road next. I think I'm not telling anyone anything you haven't already experienced and don't already know. I'm just reminding you, the main goal here is to sit, relax, and align yourself with what is. Alignment with what is, good or bad. Don't fight it. Don't worry about what was. Don't worry about what might be. When I need grounding, it's because I'm fussing about something that happened in the past, how someone hurt me or how I hurt them, for instance. Or I'm worrying about the future. Let's see. Can we think of something that might be worrying us about the future? Oh, I don't know. Death by handshake, maybe?
This is true. So, how do you, once you've put them in this little box and they're sitting there, how do you keep from letting the fears and stressors of this pandemic get you all worked up? How do you do that?
Well,
Do you
as I
take them
said,
out one at a time and then say, I don't really like you, but you're here and you can stay? What do you do?
well, I think most of my distractions involve my feelings. And especially the negative ones, worry, fear, and the like. I think it's important to allow ourselves to feel those feelings, to take those things out of the box, as you would say, look at them, but recognize that without judging them, they're just feelings. They're not actions. So feel them consciously. I am so scared about going out and taking a walk right now. Just feel it. I'm worried about getting sick. I'm worried about not being able to breathe. I'm 71 years old. I prime target for the virus. I'm worried about my clinic closing. Where will I get my 6-month tests done? These are real fears of mine, by the way. Feelings like these are very powerful, as I'm sure you know, but they need not be in control. Why? Well, because my feelings, I'm not going to talk about yours, Stephanie, or anyone else. My feelings lie. Okay. They don't tell the truth. They don't tell me how things are. I was not a terrible son. I was not a faithless friend, even though at night, every once in a while, when one of or two of those friends have died, I start having those fears. My feelings cannot tell the future, no matter how vivid they may portray it. So when they tie me up in ventilator worries, they're stealing me away from the present, being aligned with what is. We are grounded when we are aligned in the present with what is. I learned that the hard way. The latest health crisis I had involved losing a kidney. It wasn't cancer. It was in some ways worse for me. And I have never experienced so much pain. And thank God I had read Kabat-Zinn, because I just sat with the pain. I felt it. I couldn't make it go away. I just felt it. I was aligned with the present. And when we get in alignment, we listen without judgment to the pain, to the fear, to the little joys, to the serene thoughts about that crescent moon. We become mindful about what we are feeling. We bring our mind to our emotions, not to deny the emotions, but to get them in alignment, to get the mind and the emotions in balance.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to say a word, actually, since I've mentioned mind, I'd like to say a word about our bodies, about your bodies. The Descartes famously wrote, "I think, therefore I am." Now, with all due respect to the great philosopher, what nonsense. I would say this to my freshmen. I wouldn't use the word nonsense, but the word I would use, I can't use here. What nonsense. I think, therefore I am. You are not who you are just because you can think. Anyone who has experienced cancer knows that we are more than our minds. I think and I inhabit a physical body. Therefore, I am. I am grounded when I am aligned with what is. I'm beginning to sound like a broken record here. What is there and what is there more real to us than our bodies? I am grounded when I am aligned with my body, when I listen to it, and when I let it speak to me.
Yeah. That's a good point to remember, John, especially, when you are bringing that tension in and you're not letting it go. You're anxious, you're hungry, you don't know what you're doing. It makes it very challenging. And a lot of people do get injured. And we all know that going to the doctor in the hospital is the last place you want to be at this particular point in time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So these are all good points.
mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you know this. You know the connection between the mind and the body, how important a good mental attitude is for promoting bodily healing. For us in the bladder cancer community, this is a critical insight, the importance of aligning oneself with one's body. I remember after my cystectomy,
Yeah. Hmm.
got it. I actually write these things down and still can't say them.
They're so
After
close.
that horrible operation, when I woke up with a bag down here, I was paralyzed with fear, my mind at work, and not without good reason. It took 6 weeks to figure out which appliance would work for my particular rather round shape. 6 weeks of physical discomfort, an ocean of leaks, and the sinking feeling that I would never be well again. But my ostomy nurse kept telling me over and over as I fussed and he tried one appliance after another. He kept saying, listen to your body, listen to your body, and it will guide you. And it did. My stoma finally settled down, and we found an appliance that has worked for going on 5 years now. Listen to your body. When we are stressed, our body will tell us. If we can quiet down our mind, our body will tell us how to breathe. The great source, how to relax the shoulder muscles or the abs or wherever it is that you hold tension. Breathe and let the body relax the mind. I'm breathing here. You know how to promote the body's healing powers. Eat the right foods, get exercise, which admittedly is tough to do in these days of contagion. I actually walk at the local cemetery, and I walk alone, just me and the dead. Um, Pray the way you know works for you. Touch your beloved if you're quarantined together. And as I discovered in my most recent bout of illness, talk to the part of your body, as I said before, that's in pain. Find the images that center and calm you down out in the world or in the garden of your imagination. And I would add, living in the suburbs, do what you can to get a nature fix. Nowadays that most of us are sequestered inside, this is hard, but it's not impossible. We can still watch the first light of the sun in the morning and be grateful that we have another day, or sit by a window and watch the buds turn into the leaves. That's what's going on right now here in New England, right outside my door here. We can spend time interacting or observing our pets and how they're adjusting to our own new realities. And we can go out on the back deck or the fire escape and with luck and with less pollution nowadays, air pollution, see a few stars. And the moon, Romeo and Juliet's inconstant moon, who, in spite of inconstancy, returns to us month after month.
Excellent advice, John. So anything else before we open it up to questions from the group?
Well, there's so much more I could say. I was never known for being brief in my career.
That's why you made such a great professor, John.
That would be up to the students to determine, not me. I haven't even touched on the role that imagination plays. I mean, we've done a little imagination, but it could do so much more, both in terrifying us and in healing us. And we haven't talked much about healing, about the difference between being healed and being cured. I'm wondering if you know the difference out there. I want to end, though, with a quick reflection on the one word, the most important thing that cancer tried to rob you of: hope. Krista Tippett, you may know her from her NPR show On Being, writes in her book, Becoming Wise, quote, "Hope, like every virtue, is a choice that becomes a practice that becomes spiritual muscle memory. It's a renewable resource, hope, for moving through life as it is, not as we wish it to be," unquote. Hope is something we practice at. It's a choice we make over and over. In his very important book, at least back in the 70s, it was important, The Wounded Healer, the Dutch priest and theologian Henry Nouwen, who helped revolutionize pastoral care among the Christian churches back then, he has this to say about hope, quote, "Hope prevents us from clinging to what we have and frees us to move away from the safe place and enter unknown and fearful territory," unquote. Nouwen gently reminds us of what we bladder cancer survivors know, quote, "Wounds and pain become an occasion for a new vision." We in the bladder cancer community know what it is to be in need of hope, but we know too how to endure and how to give hope to others. This is important. We can offer something to our friends and neighbors. We know firsthand what it is like not to know what the future holds, the kind of situation everyone finds themselves in now. We know what this is like. And because we know, we can become beacons of hope, or at least glimmers of hope, to one another and to all those we know who are afraid and bewildered by the sudden loss of the world as we've experienced it. We know how to cope, how to grow, how to thrive, even now. And this last line that I've written out here is for you, Stephanie. We who are beacon can be beacons. How's that?
I love it. We absolutely, you bleed orange like the rest of us do. I really appreciate that. And I think that that's one of the things that really makes our community so unique is that we are connected. We are together.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard when we're all so far apart. And I'll talk a little bit about ways you can connect with Beacon in the next couple of weeks from the comfort of your own home, especially from your computer in just a little bit. But let's start first off, if you could just explain what's the difference between healing and curing. You mentioned that a couple of minutes ago. What was the difference?
Well, this is something that we talked about in our local, at the local Y here. I was involved with Livestrong doing the mindfulness component. And I was struggling. I had just had my surgery when they asked me to join and become a specialist on, cancer treatment. And it's like, I was struggling with how the reality was the doctors were telling me that I was doing real well. They caught it early, but they didn't say it was cured. And as it turns out, at least with the prostate cancer, I wasn't. I wound up having to go through all this, chemotherapy. I went through menopause, as I mentioned earlier to you before we started, and radiation, all of that. And with all of that, there was no more cancer, but they still couldn't tell me I was cured. And yet I knew I was in a better space. And it was through Livestrong and also the first one or two meetings that I went to with Beacon that I started to realize that while I probably will never be able to say I'm cured,
Mm-hmm.
The love and the care that people gave me healed something inside of me. Um, it may not have healed the cancer, but it changed my life for the better. I went through a little space of time. I will admit it wasn't too long when I thought that the cancer was a gift because it had given me this sense of wellness that I'd never had before. I would never call cancer a gift now, but um, you know, we can be healed. We heal one another in groups like Beacon. We heal one another at home with our friends and our families. And in a sense, it doesn't, since with cancer, at least with bladder cancer, with its recurrent rates and things, we can never probably say we're actually cured. Although the last time I saw my doctor after 5 years or 4.5 years, he said to me, I said, I didn't want to ask him about a cure. But I asked him, I said, is this going to go on? And the closest he came, he said to me, I would be really surprised if the bladder cancer came back.
It's good
And
news.
that was good news, but it wasn't a cure.
No.
Um,
Yeah, I agree. And unfortunately, we tell a lot of our patients that we talk to, we hope that you like your urologist because the odds are pretty good you'll be seeing them for a long time just because
yeah.
of the very nature of bladder cancer and its high rates of recurrence and the stress that goes on. And that's in and of itself enough to be stressed out about for some patients.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add this whole COVID thing. And so I'm going to read a couple of the questions that have come in. Here's an individual, Patricia, and she mentioned that she had to postpone her appointment until June because of the COVID-19, and it scares her. So, what would your suggestions be, to help her stay a little bit more grounded, a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more in touch with what's really important at this point in time? And I'm going to refer, first of all, let me ask you, Patricia, and the rest of the folks on this Facebook Live program, please check out the webinars that we did. We did 5 regional webinars on COVID-19 and bladder cancer, where we brought experts in from around the country, Northeast, Southeast, Central, Southwest, and West Coast, to really talk about things like delayed treatment, with this idea of medical distancing, keeping patients out of the hospital. In some cases, like the epicenter in New York, they really cannot bring patients in for care. They're really overrun with taking care of COVID-19 patients. And so even surgeries are getting delayed. And there are times when it's okay and times when it's not okay. And you should go in for urgent care and listen to those webinars. And I think you'll learn a lot. We also have
Mm-hmm.
frequently asked questions on our
Mm-hmm.
webpage. If you look at the bulletins about COVID-19, we're trying to keep those as updated as we can. And experts have helped us to guide those. But from Patricia's point, she's really concerned and scared that her appointment has been delayed until June. So, what would you tell her to help her stay a little bit calmer and a little grounded?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd say what you just said. First of all, I was just reading, in fact, the New York Times, there was an article this morning about just this issue of people not being able to come in and get treated for cancer. And it was hard. They never mentioned, of course, they never mentioned bladder cancer. They were talking about a number of other cancers. And
Mhm.
depending on the cancer, the first thing I would say is stay calm, remain calm, because while on the one hand, we're told we want to be treated fast, the quicker the better. On the other hand, the doctors don't necessarily always tell us that there's a little bit more wiggle room. I mean, I'm experiencing that right now. I'm stuck. I'm getting ready to move 2,000 miles away. And before I leave, I have to have tests done, and I can't get in to do the tests. Um, the other thing that I would say is it's something that I've talked about quite a bit when it comes to bladder cancer and with groups of bladder cancer patients and things. It's a matter of well, let me just say it. I'm thinking off the top of my head. It's a matter of power, okay,
Mhm.
and self-advocacy. You know what the doctors tell us is what they tell us. We have to trust ourselves as well to know that it might be, um, you know, hey, I know you're telling me I can't come in, but you know what? Go back to the grindstone and make this work because I need these tests, or I need this surgery and I'm terrified. So I think what part of it is to recognize that in a situation that is designed to put us into a passive mode, and have patience. We're called patients, aren't we?
Yes.
We're just the system and the reality puts us into a situation of passivity. But even in that state of passivity, we do have some power. I walked into Brigham and Women's Hospital when I got sick, and I told them, "Look, you're not going to heal me or cure me or whatever. I'll work with you, but you're my assistants. You help me heal myself or cure myself." And I think, that kind of chutzpah, if you will, is something that sometimes we have to say, we have to push it. But on the other hand, going back closer to what I've been talking about here, I didn't mention it, but it's good to have somebody to talk to right now when you find yourself really and legitimately terrified about something like a postponed operation or suspended BCG treatments. That's legit. Those are not nagging feelings. That's real. And, if you have somebody you can talk to, a therapist or somebody, they're doing wonderful teleconferencing now. A friend of mine has therapy 3 times a week now on his computer. So I
And you
think
don't have to drive to get
and you
there.
don't have to drive. Yeah. So I think that, on the one hand, breathe, recognize the power you have, go back into the situation and see if somehow you can shake the tree a little bit and get something done. But also, in the meantime, find a healthcare provider that you can talk to, or a therapist or someone, or just, my best therapist was an 85-year-old nun years ago when I was in my 30s. The most unlikely people will be the best listeners.
Sure. Well, I think also, don't discount the fact that your doctors, more and more of them are available for telemedicine, where you actually can see them. You don't have to go into the hospital or their practice, but you're able to see them. You can show them your scars. You can show them any concerns that you have. There's lots of really amazing things. I hope that we'll see some real improvements in bladder cancer care as a result of what they're learning on the fly. They're looking at a lot of data that was in other countries on how they might shorten or alter schedules for long-term treatments like BCG or radiation. And I think as we begin to document the fact that it's really not harming patients, we'll begin to see more things change down the road. I have a request from Barbara who said, what might you say if a bladder cancer patient is also a trauma survivor? How do we conjure up our own safe space? She said she was very happy that she turned in, by the way, and would like to stay in touch with Dr. Lanci. So, we all find our own happy space. Yours was the trip to the woods that you just took us on. How, when there's so many other competing traumatic things in somebody's life, how can you help find your mental happy place?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is trial and error. That sitting around the fire wasn't the first thing that I thought of when I was trying to get myself centered. And to some degree, the problem with trauma is, that it's just so there, obviously. And yet the power, I don't want to sound like Pollyanna here, but I do trust in the power of imagination. Without imagination, we cannot overcome the current traumas we're in. And how are we to live good and healthy lives? I go back to therapy. I would go back to the people who love me. But again, when it comes to certain really serious difficulties, medical or mental, I'm not a specialist, so it's really hard for me to give anything more, specific when it comes to advice.
So in your work at Livestrong, when you've done some of these sessions at Livestrong, have you ever had any of the community that you've been working with talk about sleep disturbances. I know a lot of us,
Oh,
and I'm probably one of them. You know,
mhm,
you just wake up with this anxiety and stress of what's happening in your world. For
mhm,
those who are still able to work and fortunate to work, it never goes away. You know, you
mhm,
go from your
mhm, mhm,
office in the living room to, you know, the kitchen, then you come back
mhm.
to the living room. So when it comes to sleep, what are your thoughts on sleep disturbances? Any experience that you've had
Oh,
without being able to sleep, and how do you
none
calm yourself
whatsoever.
down? I
I,
know.
I've always been a terrible sleeper, and it just got worse when I had to start going to bed with a bag hanging out, the night bag and everything. And every once in a while, you'd hear this little, or feel this little pop, and you'd have to be wide awake. Otherwise, you'd be at sea, literally.
Mhm.
Um, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is I don't work in my bedroom. Okay. I don't do anything. I don't even read anymore in my bedroom. I sleep in my bedroom, and I don't have a big house, you know, but that's all I do. That's what it's there for. Uh, when I wake up in the middle of the night with the anxiety, I mean, I would feel like a hypocrite if I told people, this works, because I struggle with it as well. But I think that's one of the places where, how to say, I've never said this. I've never even told my friends this, and here we are. Anyway, um, I think it's important for me to have a narrative when I'm trying to fall asleep, and I literally tell myself a story. And again, it's the use of the imagination. I place myself in a spot, and I've done this with students, not for sleeping, but for imagination workshops. I place myself in a spot in my mind where it's all dark and I'm looking down, and suddenly there's like this spotlight on this rock, this stone, right between my feet or in front of my toes. And I just focus on the stone. I get rid of the worries, I put them aside, focus on the stone for about 2 or 3 minutes. And then in my imagination, I look up. And again, this doesn't work for everyone. I know it works for most of my students when I've done it, but not everybody. Um, but I look up and I see something. It comes out of the unconscious. I didn't control it. I didn't say I'm going to look up and see a mountain or whatever. I just look up, and something, not always, but most times, something comes into view, and it usually involves a path. And,
Mhm.
this is, and I just start walking on the path, and I start letting my unconscious tell me a story. And when it works, I either have a great
Mhm.
story or I fall asleep. Certainly, I calm down. Now, by the way, I would add, I've also studied psychoanalyst C.G. Jung for 30 years, and that's the development of Jungian active imagination. And, it's not something I recommend for everybody because you might see something scary. So it would be good to have somebody in the house if it happens. I've never, by the way, had that experience. My experiences have always been uh, very, very positive, you know.
Mhm.
But I mean, beyond that, the other thing I try to tell myself, and maybe we can all do that now that we're sequestered. Look, I'm not going to get excited about not being able to sleep. I'll just take a nap tomorrow. Just let yourself sit in the anxiety,
Mhm.
and then that helps calm me down. I calm down because I'm not worried about getting enough sleep, and then I fall asleep. And if I don't, I have a nap.
That's what the couch is for, right?
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
not quite the same quality of sleep as going in your bed, but if you can catch a nap in the afternoon, then that's always
Yeah.
a good thing. So, I just wanted to point out before we close for the day, there are a few things that you've got time on your hands. I think it's really helpful to use this time wisely. We have a number of different programs. There are a few people that asked specific questions about BCG and what about their delay in treatment. Someone else asked a question specific to the BCG vaccine, which is now being tried in clinical trials to help see if it can inoculate some of our healthcare workers so that they are less likely to get COVID-19, I urge you to join us and go look on our website, and you'll see the webinar on BCG and COVID-19 that's coming up later this week with Dr. Ashish Kamat and Dr. Haggerty from Ireland. They're two experts, and they're leading what they call the BADAS trial that's really looking at, can they use BCG to immunize and provide a vaccine for healthcare workers. It's very different than what you get when you get bladder cancer BCG, and that's put inside your bladder. Your bladder is really designed so that that BCG does not get in systemically. It's designed to treat locally. So it's very different. And if you want to hear from the experts, I urge you to sign up for that. We also have a webinar on pelvic floor rehabilitation tomorrow evening, one on women. I'm going to give that in just 1 minute. I will give the website. You can also go to find out more about women and sexuality with bladder cancer. That's going to be on Thursday. And we have another program on the 24th, I think, on working as a patient advocate that John is involved with, and working with pharma in a lot of things. If you visit us at bcan.org, you'll see at the top of our website, we have a whole lot of information about COVID-19. You'll find the COVID webinar about BCG. You'll see all of the past webinars that we've done. And then, because awareness has always been a big part of what BCAN has done, our Bladder Cancer Awareness Month is coming up in May. It's just 2 weeks away. And in the past, we've had as many as 28 walks. And we've had to, unfortunately, cancel or postpone a number of those big walks around the country. And what we have done is set a virtual walk, and I hope you will consider joining me and my canine friends, Harry and Bess Truman, as we do a virtual walk on May the 2nd. And all of that information is, again, at our website, bcan.org. So if you're looking for something to do while you're social distancing and you have a computer or cell phone, smartphone, you can get a lot of good information while you're locked up by yourself with one or two loved ones, perhaps. So, John, I would really like to thank you so much. Do you have any last words?
I always have more words, you know that.
I do know that.
I can't think of all the times she's told me to be quiet so nicely. Not seriously. I want to end with two quotes, not one. I was really originally just going to end with one, but two quotes about living and living one's life. This is a great quote, and I tried to find where he said it. This is from Joseph Campbell, the great maker of studier of myths. He, back in the day, back before you were born, Stephanie, I think, he did some wonderful shows on PBS on world myths. Unfortunately, he may not have said this, but I don't care. It's wonderful. Listen to this. It's a very brief quote. "We must be willing to get rid of the life we've planned so as to have the life that's waiting for us." Whoa. You know.
That's a quote, a great quote. I've heard that one before. It's very good.
So anyway, when I was in the front lines of teaching religion, a rather fearsome place to be the last few years that I was teaching, I used to close with a poem, usually by Mary Oliver, who herself died last year in her 80s of cancer. And I want to close today with her poem, Mornings at Blackwater, from her book, Redbird. So this is what she wrote. "What I want to say is that the past is the past, and the present is what your life is. And you are capable of choosing what that will be, darling citizen. So come to the pond, or the river of your imagination, or the harbor of your longing, and put your lips to the world and live your life." And I would add, wash your hands.
Absolutely. Wash early, wash often. You can't wash enough. A little hand cream goes a long way when your hands start getting dry. That was a lovely close. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everything that you did for us, Dr. Lanci. I wish you a very smooth move as you move out west. And hopefully we'll catch up with you on the other side of the country a little bit later on. And we will see you when we're able to have gatherings again, we will see you at future bladder cancer summits for patients and their families. Right now, we have one coming up in October, but at this point, it's still a little bit iffy. So we will resume those as soon as we can do that for the safety of everybody involved. I'd like to thank you all again and remind you to visit bcan.org, where you can sign up for Virtual Walk and you can sign up for any one of a number of live webinars that are coming up about a variety of topics, and also view some of the older webinars that we have archived on our website for your viewing pleasure 24/7. So when you can't sleep, you could always watch a quality of life and bladder cancer video. We have plenty of them. So thank you so much. And I think we would close down now. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it. Stay safe, everybody.
Yes.